In a career spanning more than 50 years, there isn't much this cop hasn't seen. Detective Senior Sergeant Stephen Horn has investigated and solved some of the highest profile crimes and disasters in Australia and across the world.
I've always tried to give more than 100%. As I say to some young people, get down and get dirty.
He's a gatherer of evidence, a hunter of the truth.
Particularly for a homicide, because we're actually talking for the deceased. It's very important. You know, who else is going to speak for them, if not the police?
Maybe swab it for DNA and then put it in the fuming cabinet.
Detective Sergeant Stephen Horn is so special to so many people, but in most cases, they don't even know it.
What has Detective Horn's dedication to forensics meant to victims' families?
They don't know who he is, and he might not necessarily know who they are. But there's this mysterious connection where he has solved crimes for them and delivered justice for them.
Joining in 1968, Detective Horn has served more than 50 years in the New South Wales Police Force. 44 of those he's spent on the front line of a crime scene. Whether it's sifting for bones, traces of blood, fingerprints, DNA,
I'm just going to focus on this area here where he's got his handwriting.
any clue to unravel a crime,
And we'll do the reverse side as well.
Detective Horn is meticulous.
So the evidence that you would gather on a scene would end up in here?
Would come here, yes. Yeah. In the old days, we would probably do it ourselves and submit it to the laboratory ourselves.
He leads us to the back corner of his office and opens a cupboard lined with boxes marked with victims' names and dates. They're cases Detective Horn says he'll never give up on.
Homicides, missing persons and sexual assaults.
How do you get up day after day to go to work and see what you've seen over the years?
Multiple murders where a family has been murdered and children are involved. You always think to yourself, why the children? I try not to take the work home, not think about it at home, because if I worry about it and think about it, I'll end up making mistakes.
Back in the 80s, Detective Horn was called to 5 murders in 5 days. A single week at work many just couldn't cope with. But it's his dedication to helping people that has driven him to turn up to work day after day. And it all began here at Granville when a train derailed in 1977.
Come straight down on a carriage here. Most of the carriage is underneath the bridge here.
A young, fresh-faced forensic officer, Detective Horn's job was to retrieve the 83 victims who died and identify them.
We had a temporary morgue put up in a large tent, and when portions of the concrete from the roadway were actually moved off the carriages, we would go down and retrieve the bodies that were there, take them up to the morgue and do an initial examination of them, photograph them, look at their injuries, look at their clothing.
When it came to a disaster, you could almost guarantee Detective Horn was called in.
Police are still investigating
The Sylvania nursing home fire in 1981. 19 people perished.
There's shocking images.
The Kempsey bus crash in 89. 35 people died. However, it was a phone call in 1991 that shaped Detective Horn's career. He was called to investigate war crimes in Ukraine, where he dug up 2 mass graves, exhuming the remains of dozens of World War II victims, including 20 children.
Why did this happen? Why was these children taken from their village when the information was they didn't know if they were Jews or not? They just decided to take them and dispose of them.
He spent 3 months in the trenches with minimal food and supplies. In the summer of 1994, Detective Horn investigated the cause of some 800 bushfires throughout New South Wales. The evolution of DNA has allowed him to solve cases that were otherwise impossible to crack.
I think we had about 27 sexual assault cases solved with DNA, with about 33 charges, because some of them were serial offenders.
Most recently, Detective Horn's experience played an integral role in finding Matthew Levison's remains, 10 years after he went missing.
He helped bring our Matty home, and without that we might be still out there looking for him, so a massive thank you isn't enough.
A gift Mark and Faye Levison could never repay.
It was late in the afternoon, there was a lot of leeches down there, They were everywhere, and I always remember he came up and he had been attacked really bad. His legs, both legs were bleeding, and I felt really, really bad. And he says to me, "Faye, I've bled for you," and I just wanted to hug him. And
It's that legacy Detective Horn hopes to leave behind as he prepares for retirement.
I don't think you're ever going to fully retire.
No, well, everything's up here. It's all up here and stays there. People want my mind once I leave.
The 69-year-old says it's time to dedicate his time to his wife Brenda and granddaughter.
Commend you on 50 years.
Assistant Commissioner Peter Cotter commends not only his colleague, but Detective Horn's family too.
He just celebrated his 44-year wedding anniversary, which interestingly coincides with the same date that he graduated from general duty policing.
Is that a sentence or a marriage?
She knows just about as much about forensic science as probably what he does.
Detective Sergeant Stephen Horn, we salute you and we thank you.
What's your message to young officers?
Be professional, diligent, loyal, courteous, and don't give up.
Gosh, how do you switch all that off? What a fascinating career. Those are very big shoes to fill.